So Sam, what's your association with Fitzroy?
My association with Fitzroy, historically backwards. Currently, I don't live in the area, but I have or involved with 2 businesses in the area, but before that, probably more of a social association. I would say that coming here to frequent the nightlife.
So you came here as a student?
Early on as a student, back in the very early 80s, when I guess Fitzroy, in particular Brunswick Street, was seen as a hangout and just starting to take off with some of the bars and cafes opening up in there.
And where did you hang out in the early 80s? Brunswick Street, remember?
Punters Club, which would have been the Moonee Valley back then actually, or just starting off as the Punters Clubs, or I guess the live music scene, the Evelyn would have been another one, Evelyn Hotel. Some of the restaurants back then that I can't remember their names, some of the early restaurants, and also I guess association with friends that lived in the area.
Yeah. So you were a student in RMIT?
Yep, student at RMIT.
And where did you come from before you came to Melbourne?
I arrived in Melbourne when I was 17 to start uni, coming from a country town called Shepparton. So I guess it was, and that was in the early 80s, 1982. So it was a bit of a change, I guess, coming from a country environment to the Big Apple, the city.
Yeah.
And also coming from, I guess, more importantly, ending up in RMIT, which is the city campus based right in the middle of the city. So from the vast sort of spaces of Shepparton and farmland and stuff like that to concrete jungle of RMIT.
Yeah. And why did you particularly want to live in the city, or is it just?
Yeah, I think
just because it was close to uni.
Our uni was, I guess, part of the attraction in that I wanted to study. But probably, yeah, there would have been a huge sort of, I don't know, from probably early teenage years, a huge sort of desire to get out of the country and to live in the city.
Yeah. And where did your
family immigrated from Italy, both parents. So they were in the 50s and 60s sort of influx of Italian migrants.
And how come your parents chose where to Shepparton?
Shepparton probably has quite a large migrant population, Greek and Italian, and I guess part of the reason my family or my parents immigrated there was because of family connections. They both had brothers and sisters in town, but the reason they would have immigrated there was all predominantly because it offered lots of opportunities from a farming point of view, and because most of my parents were from southern Italy, so they were farmers there, so that gave them opportunity to, I guess, do what they knew, which was farming, in particular tomatoes, which is a big thing around that area, and orchards.
Okay.
So,
and you said that at a cafe once?
That's right. Digging up real history here, aren't you? Yeah, this is all, I guess, going from his stories to me when I was a kid. And unfortunately, being a kid, once you hear the story more than about 2-3 times, it gets all a bit boring and you don't want to listen. But now that he's passed away, I sort of regret that I didn't get more information, so I actually know it chronologically. But sometime back would have been around the Second World War, being Italian, he was in the Second World War and went to Abyssinia or Ethiopia to fight in the war there, and I think maybe just before Second World War he must have stayed on in Ethiopia and had a cafe, or more bar, I guess, / cafe in Addis Ababa, in the capital of Ethiopia, for a couple of years.
Yeah.
So and now I'm involved in a couple of businesses which are bars and hotels, so maybe it runs in the blood. Or maybe there was a secret desire there to follow in his footsteps.
Yeah. And why say, would you have a bar in Fitzroy and not in Shepparton?
Well, nowadays, probably just as good to have one in Shepparton, given that the culture is very similar there as it is here in some respects, in that you walk down the main drag of Shepparton and there's just as many little cafes, and everyone's into the whole cafe latte sort of style. But
no Bundy and Coke.
probably lots of Bundy and Coke and lots of beer. Why have a bar in Fitzroy and not in Shepparton? Maybe because my desire is still not to live in Shepparton. It's hard to explain unless you've been, you grew up in the country town and you just have, don't have any affinity for it, even though that doesn't make sense growing up there. But
so do you, from your experience and living in other suburbs and other parts of the country, do you think that Fitzroy has?
Yes, I think it has quite a unique identity. It's probably been diluted in some respect in the last few years, because everyone wants to have a bit of that identity, or wants to be involved in that identity, or think themselves as a Fitzroy local. But definitely I think it has an identity, and it would have changed over the years as well, from way back when to now.
What do you makes that identity, or makes Fitzroy unique compared to other parts of the city?
Well, ultimately be people. Because people will define that identity in whichever way, whether it is by themselves and what they do and what they stand for, or whether it is in what businesses that open up in the area and provide services to the people that live in the area. So that identity would come from things like the live entertainment gigs, live music scene in Fitzroy, and that would bring people of similar ilk, as well as define that.
Yeah. So the live music seems to be strong, right?
Yeah, I'd say Fitzroy. Probably in terms of live independent music has a very healthy scene. Probably when you look at the amount of live music that happens in the area, it has probably the lion's share of the whole live music industry in Melbourne. Yeah. I don't think there's any other suburb that would be able to list as many live gigs that happen on a weekly basis as happen in Fitzroy. That would be in a large part to Punters Club, I would say, and the Evelyn, a couple of institutions when it comes to live music.
And that's sort of important for cultivating new bands?
Very much so. Very much so.
So what do you see as some of the threats to Fitzroy that could, in the future, make it not an attractive?
Probably everyone getting on the bandwagon and thinking Fitzroy is an identity that, even I hate using the whole bohemian sort of tag that Fitzroy has had in the past, but people thinking that they want to partake in that kind of culture without really partaking in the culture, I guess, and that rape and pillage the culture. But at the same time, all the gentrification of the area, where you've got all the old warehouses being converted to lots of expensive apartments, that brings a lot of people from other Australian areas into the area with maybe not the same kind of mentality as what existed in Fitzroy, or what has existed.
And do you think things like rents going up threaten?
Very much so, rents, but even from a business point of view, because I guess that's where I can see it more so because I'm not living in the area. But from a business point of view, that'll have an effect on businesses in, for example, Brunswick Street, or even Smith Street, where smaller businesses that have been there for years, that have offered a particular service to the community, find it hard to exist because their rents go up and they have to move on. Or an example could be a live music venue that has been there for ages and rent's going up and they can't offer the kind of same service, or they can't continue because their rent's so high that they have to shut it down, but then some nice yuppified place might go in.
So the new stores would more be for the tourists rather than locals? Tourists.
And the locals, because there is a lot of locals that are coming to the area now, that are moving into a lot of the apartments, and they're getting, well, the apartments are expensive to start on. It's coming in with a bit of money and probably don't want to go to a...
So, why do you think a suburb like Fitzroy doesn't have a McDonald's?
Yet. Yet. That's a good thing, but it's probably not far away. I think it doesn't have a McDonald's because there still is a core of people that live here that are strongly opposed to that kind of thing. But it does have a 7-Eleven, and which is maybe a rung below a McDonald's. And that when that application went up for a 7-Eleven store, there was a huge community protest against it. But still, 7-Eleven had its way. It won at the appeals tribunal and got its permit to have a convenience store there.
Yeah. So why do you think people don't like the chain stores, the American multinationals?
People from this area, I don't know, maybe it's because there's a big community sense in this area, and a lot of those stores don't provide that service, that personal service, and it always means that all it does is just displace another community business, ultimately. And 7-Eleven, though it is a convenience to have a store open 24 hours a day, just means that Paul Milk Bar down the road has a tougher life of things.
So you think there's a danger of homogenising? Making everything flat and boring.
Flat and boring, red and green and white. Or the big yellow arches. Of course, yes. Yes. And maybe, no, that's definitely not what Fitzroy has stood for.
Yeah. So what have you seen as sort of positive change last 10 or 15 years since you've been close to Fitzroy?
Positive changes, that's interesting.
Do you think it's become more diverse and more tolerant? Or?
It has become diverse in the respect that maybe in a negative point of view, but I don't know, I can't really think of a positive change as such. Well, it depends which end of the stick you're at. I mean, definitely if you're a homeowner in the area, there's been a big positive for your value of your asset. That's certainly been a positive for some people, but if you're a rent payer, it hasn't been a positive because your rents may have gone up. If you're a business owner, in terms of you own the land, it's also a positive. From a community point of view, Again, I can't think of. 7-Eleven's open 24 hours a day. That's handy. But that also is a negative.
So have you seen any from your experience that's been about business in person? Yeah. Have you seen a change in clientele? Bar?
Yeah, very much so. We picked in particular the Brunswick Street bar, but the clientele has changed probably over the last 18 months quite dramatically. In particular, the Friday's weekend trade has definitely become a tourist market, and you know, in some ways it just means that there's just one less place for the locals to go to during the weekend, and it's driven or alienated that local market out on those particular nights. I hear it quite often from a lot of regulars that are happy to be in there during the day or on other weeknights, but will just stay away on the Friday nights and weekend just because of the bogan element, as they call it. I must admit, I stay away on weekends too.
So the weekdays,
very much more local market.
yeah. So, do you ever think that there will be a McDonald's in Fitzroy?
Well, I never thought a 7-Eleven would open up in Fitzroy, so I think that time will come when there will be a 7-Eleven, a McDonald's in Fitzroy, possibly in Brunswick Street. And I'm sure that if the occasion came up that they went for a permit, that there would be quite a lot of protest about it, but in the end there's really nothing in law that says that they can't open up here, so it'll be a matter of time.
Yeah.
But I dread the day.
So do you think a Starbucks could ever open on Brunswick Street or in Fitzroy?
It could, but I don't think it would do well, given the variety and the fact that Brunswick Street has some of the best coffee, a lot of coffee venues. But I think partly the thing that would work against it is the whole tag of America associated with Starbucks. I mean, it's America's philosophy or America's way of presenting coffee, which is unlimited choice and probably no really good coffee. You might be able to have your soy latte with bloody whatever the hell you want with your coffee, but in the end it's just bland.
Flavoured coffee. Flavoured
coffee, yes. Any flavour you wish.
Yeah. So once a Starbucks opens, that means just threaten to flavoured another coffee shop that may have better coffee. I guess theoretically yes, but I would hope to think that people would be discerning enough, especially in Melbourne where coffee is there's such a strong culture associated with it, that they'd be discerning enough to know that it's not good coffee. And why do you think Melbourne has good coffee culture?
Possibly because most of the coffee distributors are based in Melbourne, especially the local roasted coffee people, all emanated in Melbourne and controlled by Italians, I think.
Yeah.
In general, most of my dealings with them have been with a little cartel of Italian people running the whole coffee business.
So there's a specific history.
Very much so, and and culture associated with that as well.
Yeah.
And been running for since the 60s, so quite a good many years. And I'm sure they wouldn't lay down and let Starbucks just come into the market unless they're benefiting from it somehow or other. But if Starbucks is run like McDonald's, I imagine that the name of the game would be to centralise all purchasing and basically purchase all out of the US
and only allow you to stay there for 10 minutes.
Yep, exactly. Well, a big part of their culture is takeaway coffees, I think. But I don't think they could open a Starbucks in Brunswick Street. They'll need some big place where you can drive in and drive off with your coffee.